Hello, Tony here, back on my channel once more with another deck profile. Continuing on with our coverage of Blazing Vortex, this week we're going to be moving out of the rusty seas of the Spriggans archetype to focus on the technologically advanced police of the future in the S-Force archetype. So who are the S-Force? Well, S-Force is an archetype hinted at all the way back in Winged Raiders with the release of Psy-Frames. In the flavor text of Psy-Frame Driver, it references battling a group called the Security Forces. Well, many years later, the Security Forces, also known as the S-Force, have finally arrived, ready to arrest Driver and his associate Gamma for its wanton destruction of the meta. But what are S-Force really? S-Force is an archetype consisting of monsters of various different types, each with column-based effects. Each S-Force monster comes with an arresting effect, a continuous effect that applies a debuff to your opponent's monsters as long as they're in the same column as an S-Force monster, as well as a pursuit effect, an activate effect focused on generating consistency and advantage. And while some of these effects may come off as really obscure if not really impractical, together the deck is actually surprisingly functional, with a game plan focused on using their pursuit effects to put multiple S-Force monsters on the field to then lock out your opponent's entire field with their arrest effects, something that I hope to showcase as I get through the deck profile. Anyway, I've droned on enough. Without further ado, let's get into the deck profile. Starting off our deck profile with the rookie of the archetype, we have 3 S-Force Rapachimaru. Rapachimaru's arrest effect states that while one of my opponent's monsters are in the same column as one of my S-Force monsters, that opponent's monster may only target that S-Force monster in the same column for attacks. Furthermore, Rapachimaru's pursuit effect is a quick effect that lets me banish one S-Force card from my hand and then return this card to my hand to special summon one S-Force monster from my deck. Now, S-Force Rapachimaru is many things, but premier among them is consistency for the archetype. Starting with the pursuit effect, Rapachimaru's ability to tutor out any S-Force monster from the deck is welcome enough, giving you access to any S-Force monster that you may need for the situation at hand. But the fact that it's a quick effect is deceptively powerful. See, one of the easiest ways that your opponent can dodge an S-Force arrest effect is to just put monsters in columns that don't have S-Force monsters in them. However, due to the fact that Rapachimaru's effect is a quick effect, it can tag out on your opponent's turn to put S-Force monsters into columns that your opponent would have already put monsters into, thus allowing you to dynamically arrest your opponent and prevent your opponent from resisting arrest. And while bouncing itself back into the hand may seem rather counterproductive to the S-Force arrest strategy, it too is deceptively powerful. See, while this may be the first time that you're seeing it, banishing S-Force cards to activate pursuit effects will appear on other S-Force monsters from time to time. And by bouncing itself back into the hand, S-Force Rapachimaru guarantees that you will always have an S-Force card in your hand to banish for said pursuit effects, thus guaranteeing whatever S-Force monsters you have on the field or summon out of Rapachimaru be effective directly out the gate. S-Force Rapachimaru's arrest effect is also nothing to laugh at. Throughout the course of a game, certain S-Force arrest effects may become more key and thus become the focus of your opponent's aggression, or certain columns must be cleared such that your opponent guarantees that monster will be no longer under arrest. S-Force Rapachimaru's arrest effect creates this weird dark door scenario where your opponent may only get one attack on one of your specific S-Force monsters, thus making it much harder for your opponent to out those monsters and resist arrest. Moving on from there, we have the monster that we will most likely summon off of the effect of Rapachimaru in our 3 S-Force Gravitino. S-Force Gravitino is a level 5 light psychic monster with an arrest effect that banishes any monster that leaves the field while it was in the same column as an S-Force monster, as well as a pursuit effect that lets you search for any S-Force card whenever Gravitino is no more special summoned. Being a level 5 monster, you'll most likely only be summoning Gravitino off of Chiyomaru's effect, but the fact that it searches on summon completely offsets this specific issue. Being able to grab any S-Force card, not just your monsters but also your spell and traps, provides you extreme variability in your plays, especially since most of your S-Force spell and trap cards are either extenders or setup combos for future plays, thus making Gravitino a huge staging point for your future arrests. And like Chiyomaru, Gravitino's arrest effect is nothing to laugh at. Being able to banish any arrested monster whenever it leaves the field can be incredibly draining on your opponent, denying them graveyard effects as well as the ability to retain resources in the graveyard. This is especially punishing for X-Deck focused decks since they tend to have to give up monsters on the field to summon out their X-Deck monsters, thus having them banished off of Gravatina's effect, thus ensuring that even if they can make the out with their monsters, they'll have to be paying real unrecoverable resources to do so. Moving on from there, the next S-Force monster we're playing is 2 S-Force Platina, a level 6 Dark Spellcaster with an arrest effect that drops all your opponent's monsters by 600 attack as long as you control an S-Force monster in the same column as it, as well as a pursuit effect that on summon lets you target one banished S-Force monster and special summon it. Platina is one of the other options that we tend to summon off of our S-Force Rappa Chiyomaru. Due to the fact that in most cases you'll be banishing an S-Force monster to activate Chiyomaru's effect, you can summon out a S-Force Platina to summon back that banished S-Force monster, not only putting out 2 S-Force monsters on the field, but more importantly locking down 2 columns of your opponent. And while Platina's arrest effect may come off as rather underwhelming, it's also very powerful as well. Not only can this effect stack, meaning that having multiple Platina on the field drops your opponent's monsters by a culmination of more attack, the fact is most of your S-Force monsters come at the mid to high attack range, meaning that debuff can put your opponent's monsters low enough such that they can't run over any of your S-Force monsters, thus making it much harder for your opponent to resist the rest. Finally, rounding off our S-Force monsters, we have our 2 S-Force Orifists. Orifist is a level 4 light Cyburst monster that has an arrest effect that prevents your opponent from targeting any monster they control while it's in the same column as an S-Force monster, as well as a pursuit effect that when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, you can banish one S-Force card from your hand to destroy that monster. Outside of being really unfortunately named, S-Force Orifist is by far the weirdest of the S-Force monsters. There's not a lot of card effects that your opponent has that targets their own monsters, so the arrest effect of Orifist may not come up as much as you think. However, this is the only S-Force monster that has any direct interaction with your opponent on their turn through its pursuit effect, and as such you want to play at least the 2 to be able to have that disruption at certain situations. Moving on from there into other engines that we're playing a small engine of 3 Neospace Connector and 1 Neospace Aqua Dolphin, with the express purpose of making out our Noble Knight Isolde. Due to the fact that Rappa Chiyomaru is a warrior, Isolde can summon that card from the deck, and the Neospace Connector engine not only gives us the ability to also rip out hand traps that would stop our Chiyomaru, but it also gives us hand knowledge of what our opponent is playing, thus allowing me to select the proper targets to summon out with our Chiyomaru. Furthermore, despite the fact that you need 2 equip spells to summon out Chiyomaru, we're actually only playing 1, and that's because we're only going to be sending 1 equip spell to summon out one of our 2 Idia, the Divine Squire. Now you may have seen Idia previously in some Monarch based decks, but what Idia does is that upon normal or special summon, you can special summon out 1 warrior from your deck with 800 attack and 1000 defense, which just so conveniently is the stat line of our Rappa Chiyomaru. This not only gives us 2 additional ways to summon out our Rappa Chiyomaru on top of the warrior engine to summon out Idia, but due to the fact that Idia is a level 1, it means that we can play 1 less equip spell, thus leading to 1 less brick in our deck. Finally, rounding off the monsters with our hand traps, we have only the 3 Ash Blossom. Due to the fact that cards like S-Force Rappa Chiyomaru require that you banish S-Force cards in your hand to activate its effects, having too many hand traps in your hand may not do you well, given the fact that they do nothing for your S-Force plays, and as such we're only playing the 3 quintessential Ash for the format. Moving on into our spells, we have our 3 S-Force Bridgehead, a field spell which, when activated, allows you to add any S-Force monster from your deck to your hand. Furthermore, should an attack be declared by one of your opponent's monsters onto an S-Force monster in the same column, you can protect that monster from being destroyed by that one battle. Mostly being used as a way to just search your S-Force monsters, S-Force Bridgehead's protection effect only really works while you have a Rappa Chiyomaru on the field, since in any other case your opponent can just select a different monster in a different column to attack. However, like most of your S-Force cards, once you do have that setup on board, Bridgehead does provide a decent amount of protection for some of your bigger S-Force monsters, thus making it much harder for your opponent to resist the arrest effects of those monsters. Moving on from there, we have our 2 S-Force Showdown. S-Force Showdown is a quick play spell card with 2 modes. When activated, you can either special summon 1 S-Force monster directly from your hand, or target 1 S-Force monster in your graveyard and add it back to your hand. Now, despite the simplicity in its effects, S4 Showdown actually has a lot of utility for the deck. As a spell card, its first mode can be used to put things like Gravitino or Platinum out of your hand onto the field, thus preventing you from bricking with them and getting their on-summon effects. Furthermore, as a quick play spell, this card can be activated on your opponent's turn to put an S-Force monster in a column that your opponent already has a monster in, thus applying that arrest effect on that monster as well. Finally, despite the fact that you may not be using its second mode as much, it is still a decent top deck option to grab back an S-Force monster to start your plays with. Moving past the S-Force cards, we're playing the one equip spell in our Sorta Deep-Seated to be sent off of our Isolde to summon out our Edea. Now, Sorta Deep-Seated is nice for this deck in the fact that should it be sent to the graveyard, it puts itself to the top of the deck, which then after resolving something like your Rapid Chiyomaru will then be shuffled into the deck to then be sent off of another Isolde to summon out a second Edea, thus giving us a continuous stream of ability to access our Rapid Chiyomaru for our plays. Rounding off our spells with our consistency cards, we have the 1 Rhoda to search into our Rapid Chiyomaru, the 1 Terraforming to search into our Bridgehead, as well as our 3 Pot of Prosperity. Now, like most of the decks that play Pot of Prosperity, I'm looking for specific cards to complete combo pieces that I may need to start some of my plays, and as such, Pot of Prosperity is one of those cards that help me do that. Obviously, if you're looking for a more budget option, I once again state that you can replace this card with something like Extravagance, however, you will not probably get the same level of consistency. Regardless, it's an option. Moving on into the traps, we start off with our 3 Reinforced Justice. Reinforced Justice is a normal trap which when activated allows me to special summon out 1 level 2 warrior from my deck, which if you haven't guessed is our Rapid Chiyomaru. And being a trap, there's a lot of utility for this card. On our opponent's turn, should I activate this card, I can obviously summon out the Rapid Chiyomaru into a column that already has one of my opponent's monsters in it, thus putting it under arrest, but suppose I've already resolved the Rapid Chiyomaru effect on the previous turn, thus having one in my hand. What I could do from there is I can activate the effect of the Rapid Chiyomaru that I've summoned out to banish the one in my hand to do some combos from there as well. Next up, we have our 2 S4 Specimen. S4 Specimen kind of works like a Call of Haunted for this deck in that it special summons 1 S-Force monster from your banished or your graveyard into a column that already has one of your opponent's monsters in it. And while it's in the graveyard, except for the turn that it was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from the graveyard to then move one of your S-Force monsters to a different column. Now, the revive effect can be useful, but it is somewhat limiting in the fact that it does require its summoned monster to go into a column that already has one of your opponent's monsters in it, which means that if you've already locked down one of your opponent's monsters, you really can't extend with this effect. However, the fact that it is an S-Force card means that at worst it can be banished by one of your S-Force cards like your Rapid Chiyomaru to activate its effects, and the moving column effect can be useful in keeping your opponent from losing their arrest lock. Finally, rounding off the traps and the rest of the main deck, we have our 2 Compulsory Evacuation Device as well as our obligatory 3 Infinite Impermanence. Now, Infinite Impermanence is pretty obvious, it's just a staple hand trap, but Compulse here actually has some really funky utility in this deck. Not only can you bounce one of your opponent's arrested monsters while you're under a Gravitino, thus banishing that monster, but you can also bounce one of your own S-Force monsters, thus potentially giving it a way to trigger its on-summon effect once more, or using it as fodder for one of your S-Force pursuit effects otherwise. Moving on into the extra deck, we start off with the 1 Salmo Great Almirage, something that we can link an Edea into should it get negated, thus clearing up the column for another S-Force monster. We have the 1 Barricade Board Blocker, a way to discard a card, but also in this case a unique way to grab back our field spell as well. We have the 1 IP Masquerena, which we can use to link away on our opponent's turn or on our turn to summon out a bigger monster that can't be destroyed by card effects. We have the 1 Nightmare Unicorn and Cerberus as removal options. We have the 2 Isolde for the Edea play. We have the 1 Nightmare Unicorn also as a means of removal that we can access off of our IP Masquerena, as well as the 1 S-Force Justify, a Link 3 monster that requires 3 monsters, including 1 S-Force monster, which on either player's turn can target one of my opponent's monsters, negate its effects, and then move it to a zone that it points to, which is really useful in the fact that not only does it allow me to set up some arrest locks that way, but when it battles, it then banishes any monster it points to, thus being a non-targeting removal as well. From there, we have Link 4s that we generally don't make, but we can make. We have the 1 Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess for negation, the 1 Boros Sword for OTKs, the 1 Avermax, which is one of our premier options for our IP Masquerena to be linked into, as well as one of our 2 Axis Go Talkers, one of which most likely we will banish for prosperity. So it's at this point that we reach the combo component of our deck profile, and while S-Force doesn't exhibit a lot of complex combos, that doesn't mean that the deck doesn't have some manner of board building capability. Thus, for this segment, I'm going to demonstrate a quick 2-card combo that requires a combination of any Rapid Chiyomaru and any other S-Force card, as well as a quick test hand to show what S-Force can do in a few turns. Anyway, the deck has been set up, let us begin. So starting with the combo that requires that you open any Rapid Chiyomaru as well as a S-Force monster, this combo is rather simple. Using any various means to get the Rapid Chiyomaru on the field, you're going to activate Rapid Chiyomaru's effect to banish the other S-Force monster in your hand to bounce back the Rapid Chiyomaru and special summon out an S-Force Platina. Platina will then trigger on summon to special summon back the S-Force monster you've banished for Rapid Chiyomaru's effect, in turn not only locking down 2 columns under arrest, but putting 2 monsters on the field while maintaining the Rapid Chiyomaru in your hand. Now this 2-card combo becomes a little more complex should one of the S-Force monsters you open be your S-Force Gravitino. Like before, you're going to find a way to get your Rapid Chiyomaru onto the field and then activate its effect, this time banishing your Gravitino. Once again, you're going to summon out the Platina to the field and then use Platina's effect to bring back the Gravitino. Now Gravitino will now let you search, and in most cases, if you already have the extender, you're going to grab your Bridgehead. But if you don't have that, you're going to grab an S-Force Showdown as well. See, Showdown here gives you a few options. Obviously, immediately, I can activate the Showdown to special summon the S-Force Rapid Chiyomaru that I have in my hand to link all 3 monsters away to make a Justify, or in most cases what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the Showdown. On my opponent's turn, my opponent will most likely attempt to resist arrest by placing a monster in any of the free columns at the moment. With that, I can activate the Showdown to special summon the Rapid Chiyomaru onto the field, thus locking down that column. However, should you already have another S-Force monster on top of that, you can now activate Rapid Chiyomaru's effect once more to repeat the process, banishing the S-Force monster to summon out a second Platina to bring back that banished monster, thus arresting 4 columns, preventing your opponent from being able to only have 1 free column to play with. Moving on to our test hand, the test hand we're going to be working with today is going to include 1 Pot of Prosperity, 1 Reinforced Truth, 1 Infinite Impermanence, 1 Sort of Deep-Seated, and 1 S-Force Bridgehead. Okay, I have a lot of targets I do think I can search with S-Force Bridgehead, but I think it's going to depend on what I get with my Pot of Prosperity first. So let's start off by activating that. We're going to banish 6 monsters from our extra deck face down. Let's say one of the Axis Code Talkers, since we don't really need it. Let's say the Appaloosa, since we're probably not going to make a Link 4. The Unicorn, since we're even not going to make a Link 3. One of the Isolde, since we don't need that many. Let's say the Cerberus as well as the Barricade Board Blocker for 6. From there, we're going to reveal the top 6 cards of our deck, being 1 Neospace Connector, 1 another S-Force Bridgehead, 1 Rapid Chiyomaru, 1 Ash Blossom, 1 Edea, and 1 more Neospace Connector. See, this entire thing is aiming at getting into our Rapid Chiyomaru, so in this case, let's say I'm going to grab the Neospace Connector, especially since we have the sort of Deep-Seated already in our hand. From there, we're going to normal summon the Neospace Connector and then activate its effect to special summon out a Neospatian Aqua Dolphin from our deck. From there, we're going to activate Neospatian Aqua Dolphin's effect, discarding the sort of Deep-Seated to look at our opponent's hand, maybe rip off a hand trap, but mostly the purpose is to get the sort of Deep-Seated into the graveyard, where it will trigger to go to the top of the deck. From there, we're going to link away both the Neospace Connector as well as the Neospatian Aqua Dolphin, both as warriors, to summon out our Isolde, and activate Isolde's effect to send that sort of Deep-Seated back from the top of the deck to the graveyard to special summon out our Edea from our deck. Edea will then trigger, allowing us to summon out a Rapid Chiyomaru from our deck. From there, also sort of Deep-Seated will go to the top of the deck, but it's not going to stay on the top long because we're going to activate the S-Force Bridgehead and then use S-Force Bridgehead's effect to search for our Gravitino. From here, you kind of know where this is going to go. We're going to activate the effect of our Rapid Chiyomaru to bounce itself back to the hand by banishing the Gravitino to summon out a Platina from our deck. Platina will then trigger to summon out the Gravitino, and we're going to use Gravitino's effect now, but since we already have the Bridgehead, we're actually going to search for an S-Force Specimen here, giving us 3 forms of disruption on our opponent's turn. From there, we're going to set the S-Force Specimen along with the other 2 traps, and then pass our turn to our opponent. Now, on our opponent's turn, we have a few options. Looking at the state of the board right now, we know that we have 2 columns currently under arrest, but we have 3 free columns that currently aren't under arrest. And while we can't do anything about the column that Edea currently occupies, we can do something about these 2 columns. Should your opponent attempt to summon anything into any of these 2 columns here, what we can do is we can start off by activating that Reinforced Truth to summon out a Rapid Chiyomaru directly from our deck to the field. And that in turn arrests another column. However, we can do a little better than that. We're going to activate Rapid Chimar's effect, banishing the Rapid Chimar in our hand to bounce this Rapid Chimar back to the hand to special summon out of Platina once more. Platina will then trigger to summon back the Rapid Chimar to the field, in turn arresting 4 columns now. Furthermore, because Rapid Chimar is now once again back on the field, it means that all your opponent's monsters that are in the same column as one of your S-Force monsters can only target that monster for attacks, which means for some unique reason your opponent can't even target the S-Sold because they're forced to target the S-Force Platina. And thanks to Bridgehead, that monster can be destroyed by battle once. However, thanks to the fact that there is an ED on the field, it means that at worst, 2 of your opponent's monsters will be attacking one of your opponent's S-Force monsters. And that's maybe an issue if it wasn't for the fact that even if they do clear that monster off the field, we do have an S-Force specimen which we can activate to bring back that S-Force monster that was destroyed, thus maintaining the lock for those 4 zones. Either way, on our following turn, what we can do is we could turn all these Platinas into attack, maybe link these monsters away to make and justify, summon out the Rapid Chimaru, and then OTK our opponent from there. And that's going to do it for our S-Force deck profile. Honestly, when I initially built this deck, I did it more as a joke to hate on my friend's Mech Knight deck. However, I've come to realize that this deck actually has a lot of crazy potential. Due to the many ways that you can access your Rapid Chimaru, and your Rapid Chimaru provides you so much access into the rest of your S-Force monsters, it's very easy to put up multiple S-Force monsters onto the field to lock down many columns with their arrest effects to grind out the game. However, like most police in the current era, they really don't have a lot of modern solutions for modern problems. For one, this deck doesn't have the ability to put up S-Force monsters into all 5 columns easily, thus meaning that there's always a little gap that your opponent can combo off into, and that becomes a problem. Furthermore, this deck really doesn't have a lot of interaction with your opponent. While most of your S-Force effects are continuous, you don't really have a lot of activated effects that you can use to get rid of your opponent's monsters on your opponent's turn, and that means that your opponent can eventually combo off enough to out your board that way as well. However, the support from Lightning Vortex seems to look to fix that, and I look forward to building this deck when that time comes. Regardless, my name is Tony Yang, this has been an S-Force deck profile. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time.